Sorry for starting this stream late. Let's get started. I caught up somewhere, and I had a delay that took literally a long time. But yeah, nevertheless, I had to make sure that this stream happens. So let's continue with learning FastAPI. So I want to continue learning with this topic called body updates, and then after that, I can move on to something else. So yeah, let's continue. So it says body updates is saying update replacing with put. Update replacing with put. So they're saying to update an item, you can use the HTTP put operation. Okay. You can use the JSONable encoder to convert the input data to data that can be stored as JSON. For example, a NoSQL database. For example, converting a date time to string. Okay. And again, once again, this is not the time I start my streams. Okay. This is just late, but we'll revert back to the usual time tomorrow. So they're saying this works in Python 3.10 and above. And then importing FastAPI from FastAPI. So from FastAPI.encoding, they're importing JSONable encoder, which we looked at in the stream yesterday. I studied this yesterday. Then there is base model imported from Pydantic. And then there is an instance of FastAPI. Just a moment, I need to confirm that everything is working well on this other screen. Okay, so it looks good. So let's continue. And then this is item, which is a Pydantic base model because it inherits from base model. It has a name, which can be a string or none, and a default is none. Description, a string or none, default value is none. A price, which is a float or none, default value is none. So all these are optional, okay? And we know why, because they have default values of none. And then after that, we have tags, which is a float with a default value of 10.5, and tags, which is a list of strings, and the default value is an empty list. Then going on is a simple items dictionary, one group of a path, operation, decorator, and function. Then we have what we're now actually looking for. Okay. So they're saying you can, up here they said you can to update an item, you can use the HTTP put operation. Okay. So you see here they've said update.put. Okay. And the endpoint or route is item/item ID, which is a path variable. Okay. And the response model is item, which is this one here. Okay. So we see that they have here the JSONable encoder, okay, which converts item, which is a Pydantic model, to something which can easily, okay, be converted to JSON, okay, which is this, the value here, okay. Then they say items ID, so they are getting something, okay, in this dictionary by its key, whether it is full, bar, or bars, and it's been updated using this new item. Then they simply return. So you're trying to mimic what happens in a database, okay, which might not be the case, but this is a good example. So of course we can go to documentation and try it out, but there won't be any big difference to say. So I've pasted the code. The app looks to be running. Okay, so I can come here to the browser and go to localhost 8000 docs. Okay, you can see the get item is here, but what we're interested in is the put. Okay, so if you put, like, if I say try it out and I put full, so let us be lowercase, okay, to pass this, and then I execute, okay, and scroll down, you see we get the usual response body that we could always get, but of course the dictionary has been updated. Okay, so yeah, to update simply use put. Okay, but again, of course, put is the operation that makes sense for updates, but the actual update happens in your logic. Okay, and of course, if you need to convert like your model, okay, to JSON, something which is JSONable. So they say use the JSONable encoder. This is a very good thing to do. So for people who have or earlier or lower versions of Python, make sure you look out this. Sorry, someone is interrupting me. Let me just respond to them. Just a minute. Okay, just a minute. Okay, I think I've done that. Let's continue, guys. Sorry for that interruption. Okay, so I've seen those with earlier versions of Python. You can look at this 3.9 plus or 3.8 plus, but what I guess is simply the annotation. Okay, here they introduce union and here they introduce list and union only. Okay, so they say put is used to receive data that should replace existing data. Yeah, and this is correct. So they're saying warning about replacing. They're saying that means if you want to update the item bar using put with a body containing name, bars, price, 3 description none, because it doesn't include the already stored attribute tax 20.0, the input model would take the default value of 10.5. Yes, because this doesn't have a tax attribute. It only has name, price, and description. So the default, which is up here, this default value 10.5 will be added, okay, when you're saving, if you try update it, okay. So they're saying, and the data would be saved with that new tax of 10.5, okay. So let's go on. They're saying partial updates with patch, okay. They're saying you can also use the HTTP patch operation to partially update. This means that you can send only the data you want to update, leaving the rest intact. In fact, those of you who have experience with other sects of document of experience, I mean with other areas of like backend development, you know that put, okay, is used to update the resource, okay? Everything is updated, okay? And patch updates only part, okay? Only part, okay? Not everything. So saying patch is less commonly used and known than put, okay? Many teams use only put even for patch updates. Yeah, by the way, it's actually possible to do a put. Like in Python, you can use, if you write your logic properly, can use this. I don't know if you know this set ATRR. Okay, we have some kind of syntax like this. You have an instance, okay, the key, the attribute name, and the attribute value. You can do this, okay, using this function in your logic. So yeah, just if you didn't know, just a small tip, okay. Let's go on. So they're saying you are free to use them however you want. FastAPI doesn't impose any restrictions. But this guide shows you more or less how they are intended to be used. Okay, you are free to use them. FastAPI doesn't impose, so you can use patch, okay, for partial updates and put for 100% updates, or you can only use put for both partial and full updates. So you're saying using Pydantic's exclude and set parameter. So they're saying if you want to receive partial updates, it's very useful to use the parameter exclude and set in Pydantic's model.dump. Okay, let me read this again. If you want to receive partial updates, it's very useful to use the parameter exclude underscore and set in Pydantic's model.dump. So they're saying like item model.dump exclude and set equals to true. Okay, so you're saying you remember model.dump simply converts the item to JSON. Okay, it gives you something which is JSONable. Oh my god, I won't bite my tongue. Something JSONable. It's like the result of what you do when you do that JSON, this JSON module in Python. Okay. If I import JSON, okay, then I use JSON dot dumps, okay, something like this. It is similar to this, okay, or what they had initially, okay. For example, they had, if this item, I can come inside here, okay, and I say item dot dict, okay, but now this was deprecated, okay. It returns a dictionary. So, and a dictionary can be easily converted to JSON. So something which is easily converted to JSON is called JSONable. But I changed it to model.dump, not model.dump, but model underscore dump, like this. Okay, as simple as that. So this gives us a dictionary version of the item Pydantic model, and that's what they are telling us to do. Okay, and so they're saying if you want to receive partial updates, it's very easy to use the parameter exclude and set. Okay, so let's read here. They're saying in Pydantic version 1, the method was called to dict. Okay, was called dict, which I've just showed you. It was deprecated but still supported in Pydantic version 2 and renamed to model underscore dump. Okay, so they're saying the example here uses a dictionary for compatibility with Pydantic version 1, but you should use model dump instead of Pydantic version 2. Okay, and like I've just showed you that item has been deprecated. How do you know it has been deprecated? If I say item.dict, just to make sure you've understood the point. Okay, and I do this, you see it has been struck through. And if I hover over, they say the method dict in class base model is deprecated. The dict method is deprecated. Use model dump instead. Okay, so I hope you've understood that with my repetition. So if I hover over this, you see if I scroll, using the return type, it's still a dictionary. Okay, still returns a dictionary. So I'll leave this. So don't forget to throw out the parameter. Okay, saying model.dump is enough. You have to say exclude, okay, and set equals to true. Okay, don't forget this. So let's continue. They're saying that would generate a dict or a dictionary with only the data that was set when creating the item model, excluding default values. So if I pick this example, okay, this example here, okay, and then probably I do this. I see this and I compare and I just place it up here so that we do good comparisons. So without this, okay, without exclude and set equals to true, by default it's going to be false, okay, and we try to update something like this, okay, having name, price, description, but not tax, okay. Tax will be added when we are saving with a default value of 10.0, okay, but if unset is equals to true, tax will not be added, even if it has a default value of 10.5 here. Why? Because it's not in the request. So it's in the request data. Okay, so very, very important to notice this. Okay, once an attribute is not in the request data, for example, if this is our request data, okay, only the name, price, and description will be updated when exclude unset is true. So unset, it simply means attributes or data which has not been set in your request. For example, in this case, tax has not been set. Tags is not inside here. Okay, so it will be excluded. Very important. And again, like you're seeing, they're just repeating things we already know. Okay, because this is not the first time they're talking about model dump. If you're keen, this is not the first time they're talking about exclude and set. Okay, and I'm actually glad that they have brought it back again. Because if you ask me off the top of my mind, if I remember this, I wouldn't. Okay, but now it's way clearer. So Just checking on my audio on this other screen. All right, it looks okay. Let's go on. So they're saying then you can use this to generate a dict with only the data that was set or sent in the request, omitting default values. As simple as that. It simply means only the data which was sent in the request will be updated. And that's one good way of now using what? Put, whereby you can use put for both updating, okay, partially, or updating everything, okay? This is a nice trick. All right, let's see this, okay? If you look at this line of code, okay, even if I copied this and I pasted it here and went to our documentation, you won't see any big change in documentation. But what I want you to see is this, okay? I want to explain to you this because all these other things we know them, okay? I don't want to overbore you because I know many of you have been following, and if you've been following this streams from stream number 1, and whether this is stream number 21, and if you're joining this for the first time, I'm studying FastAPI live, and this is the 21st stream, okay? So if you don't understand anything, you might have to go back from the beginning. But this is stream 21, and we are moving along, okay? And usually I start my streams an hour earlier than now. So let me carry on, okay? If you look at this function here, okay, they get the stored item. So they're saying stored item equals to items, item ID. Where's item ID coming from? It's a path parameter. They're picking an item by its ID in this, okay? Meaning the ID could be full, bar, or bars, okay? So they pick an item like this, and this item here, remember, is simply another dictionary, okay? Having name and price, name, description, price, or name, description, price, and tax or tags, okay? Can have some or all the fields, okay, which are here, okay? Then after that, they say item dot dict, not yet, they say item, okay? Then they unpack all the values, okay? Using these these two asterisks, double asterisks, to unpack all the stored item data into the stored item model, okay? When they are done doing that, then on this next line, they now remove them. They say item dot dict exclude and set equals true. But remember, in your code, use model dump, okay? Use model dump. After that, the next line of code, they now copy, okay? They make a copy of this. Say copy and say update equals to update data, like that. Then they change, they see now the items ID equals to that, yeah, just enable encoder updated item, because you have to actually store a dictionary here, okay? Something which is JSONable. That's why they're using JSONable encoder. But the most important line that we need to know is this, okay? This is the logic that we need. That is very important, okay? Is this part, okay? By using exclude and set equals to true. That's what's important for us in this case. And of course, guys, having other versions and variants, you can look at this, okay? But again, the change is only on the annotation using union and using list and union with Python 3.8, okay? But the whole concept is the same. So you're saying using Pydantic's update parameter, now you can create a copy of the existing model using model underscore copy and pass the update parameter with a dict containing the data to update, okay? Yeah, simply create a copy of what is existing, okay, using model copy and pass the update parameter with a dict containing the data to update. So saying in version 1 of Pydantic, the method was called .copy. It was deprecated, but still supported in Pydantic version 2 and renamed to model underscore copy, okay? So they're saying the examples here use copy, but for compatibility with version 1, you should use model copy instead you should use model underscore copy instead if you can use Pydantic version 2, okay? Yeah, so this copy should be model copy if you're using version 2. like me. Okay, so they're saying like stored item model dot copy. Okay, so you get a copy of the data, then you update it. You say update equals to update data. As simple as that. Okay, and they're just emphasizing the same point, which is this. Okay, so yeah, not really that hard to understand. I would have this. Okay, so the idea is pick the item from the dictionary, but this it could be from your database. Okay, instead, and not a dictionary. After that, populate the model with the data. Okay, exclude the values which have not been set. Okay, so this is the information you want to you want to actually what update. Then after that, okay, update your model. Okay, this model here, but what you should do instead is create a copy of it. Okay, by using copy, or rather model copy. Then you update. Then after that, finally, you, since this is a Pydantic model, you need to convert it to something JSONable. So you convert it to, you use the JSONable encoder function, pass in the updated item, and update your dictionary using the key item ID, and you'll be good to go. Then of course you can return it. Okay, and again, you have other versions and variants. You can check if you fall into these categories, but the concepts are the same. So they have a recap here. They're saying, in summary, to apply partial updates, you would optionally use patch instead of put. Okay, retrieve the stored data. Okay, just like here, this step is retrieving the stored data. Okay, after that, put that data in a Pydantic model like this. This is putting it in a Pydantic model. Okay, so you're saying, let us start afresh carefully. Okay, step by step. In summary, to apply partial updates, optionally use patch instead of put. Okay, so here you see the use patch, but up here, where you think also patch. Okay, I saw a put somewhere. Okay, but you can use put by that, it will still work. Okay, so they use patch. Okay, then they're saying retrieve the stored data. This is what they're doing on this line of code, which I've highlighted right now. They're retrieving it from the dictionary using the item ID. Okay. After that, they put the data in a Pydantic model, which is what they're doing here. They get this item from the dictionary, the stored item, and unpack it using this double asterisk into this variable stored item model. Okay. After that, they say generate a dict without values from the input model using exclude and set. Okay, which is this, by saying exclude and set equals to true. So they remove default values which have not been set in the sent in the request. Okay, removing all default values which have not been sent in the request. So they're saying this way you can update only the values set by the user instead of overriding values stored with default values in your model. Okay, so the goal is ignoring default values which have not been set by the user. Okay, then they're saying after that, create a copy of the stored model, updating its attributes with the received partial updates using the update parameter. Okay, so this is the line. They create a copy, okay, using copy, or rather model copy with new versions. Okay, then you pass the data to this argument called update. Okay, then they're saying convert the copied model to something that can be stored in your database. For example, using JSONable encoder. Okay, that's what they used here. Okay, and they're saying this is comparable to using the model.dump method again, but it makes sure and converts the values to data types that can be converted to JSON. For example, date time and to str. Okay, so model.dump and JSONable are very comparable. Okay, but JSONable encoder makes sure and converts that the values it converts the values to data types that can be converted to JSON. For example, a date to a string. So that save data to your database and return the updated model. As simple as that. And of course, very soon we shall be looking at real databases and not just storing information to a dictionary. Okay, that's going to happen very soon. And of course, we have a lot of code here that you're already familiar of. And now they are simply highlighting everything which we have just discussed. Yeah, guys, how is it going so far? Let me know. in the chat. How is it going, guys? This is the 21st stream, and I'm sure there are many of you who have been consistent here. I would love to know how it can go, how it's going for you. Do these things make sense? Are they challenging? Do you find them interesting? Do you find learning with me something that is giving you knowledge? I would like to know in the chat. What do you think is something I've not understood that you've understood? You can help me. Okay, let's say tip. There's a tip here saying you can actually use this same technique with an HTTP put operation. But the example here uses patch because it was created for these use cases. Okay. Then they have here note saying not the input model is still validated. And now they're saying if you want to receive partial updates that can omit all the attributes, you need to have a model with all the attributes marked as optional. Wait, I need to read this again. Notice that the input model is still validated. Okay, yes, that is true. And they're saying if you want to receive partial updates, okay, that can omit all the attributes. Okay, a partial update which can omit all attributes, you need to have a model with all the attributes marked as optional. Okay, with the default values or none. Yeah, which means everything must be equals to, like, for example, here, okay, tax must be equals to none. Tags must also equal to be none, meaning they're all optional, to make them optional. Then they're saying that is if I want to receive partial updates which can omit all. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense actually. So they're saying to distinguish from the models with all the to distinguish from the models with all optional values for updates and models with the required values for creation, you can use the ideas described in extra models. To distinguish the models with all optional values for updates and models with required values for creation, you can use ideas described in extra models. This is something we studied. I don't know if you remember, okay? Where you can have an input model, output model, and a database model, okay? To separate stuff, okay? We studied that. In other words, they are simply saying you can have a different model for updating your information, a different model for creating your data, and a different model for storing the database, depending on your needs. If you remember in that example, they omitted passwords, okay? All right, so the next topic, which I'm thinking maybe we need to study is dependencies, okay? Maybe we can go through this also, and then maybe call it a day, and tomorrow I can continue something which they call classes as dependencies, okay? So let me look at this one more time. Not one more time actually, for the first time, but let's continue. A moment, please. Okay. So dependencies, they're saying FastAPI has a very powerful but intuitive dependency injection system. Okay. It is designed to be very simple to use and to make it very easy for any developer to integrate other components with FastAPI. So if I hover over dependency injection, you see they say also known as components, resources, providers, services, injectables, and we're going to know about these, okay? If you've discovered, like I think Lina said yesterday, some of these words look big. When you actually read them, you find it's usual stuff. There's nothing really hard here, okay? Nothing really hard. So let's go on. Here they're saying what is dependency injection, and they're saying dependency injection means in programming that there is a way for your code, in this case your path operation functions, to declare things that it requires to work and use. Okay, dependencies. So something that your function depends on, simply dependence. Playing around with English, right? Yeah. So in programming, meaning there's a way for your code, in our case, a path operation function, and of course, by now we all know, we should be all knowing what path operation functions are. That a path operation function, okay, needs to declare things that it requires to work and use. The things that the path operation function requires to work and use are dependencies, okay? And then they're saying, and then that system, in this case, FastAPI, will take care of doing whatever is needed to provide your code with those needed dependencies. And in bracket, they're saying inject the dependencies. So providing them is called injecting, okay? It will provide the path operation function with all the things that are required for that function to operate, okay? Hence dependency injection, okay? Dependency, the thing that is required, injection, providing, okay? So all required things will be provided. This is how I understand it. If you have a different understanding, please let me know in the chat, okay? And they're saying this is very useful when you need to, number one, have shared logic, meaning the same code logic again and again, okay, to avoid repetition, okay. They're saying share database connections. Your several services may be using the same database connection and you don't want to make it repetitive, okay. They're saying you don't enforce security, authentication, role requirements, okay, and many other things, okay. And this is true. It's not only limited to this, okay. Like you'll see, I think when we are building our app, and I think all these while minimizing code repetition. So first steps, they're saying, let's see a very simple example. It will be so simple that it is not very useful for now. But this way we can focus on how the dependency injection system works. Okay, this is very okay for it to be simple because the goal should be to understand dependency injection. So even if it's not a useful example, the win will be when we have understood. So they're saying create a dependency or dependable. Okay, then they're saying let's first focus on the dependency. It is just a function that can take all the same parameters that a path operation function can take. So this dependency is simply a function which can take the same parameters which a path operation function can take. Let's see this in action. Python 3.10, the import annotated, the import depends and FastAPI. We don't know what depends is. I'm guessing this is what we're going to be using for this. Then they have an instance of FastAPI. Then they have a function, okay? So this function, remember, is async def. And if you don't know what async def, please look at the previous videos, streams that we made. I think either stream 1, 2, or 3, we talked about asynchronous code, async await, coroutines, etc. So this function is called common parameters. Remember, it is not a path operation function, okay? It takes q, a string, or none, but by default is none, meaning it is optional. They have skip, which is an integer, by default is 0. They have limit, which is an integer, by default is 0. And it returns simply everything, okay? Which is the parameters. Returns q, returns skip, returns limit, okay? Then we have a path operation function here, okay? I mean, path operation decorator and a path operation function, okay? So the dependable is added to the path operation function, okay? But let us not go to that, okay? Right now, what we're interested in is creating the dependency, which is this. This is the dependency, okay? The next part, they're going to explain it. They're going to explain it in the next code, okay? All this is going to be explained. Let's continue. Okay, I'm now learning how their documentation is now structured. So they're saying that's it, 2 lines, okay? And they're saying it has the same shape and structure that all your path operations, that all your path operation functions have. You can think of it as a path operation function without the decorator, without the app.get, some path, okay? And they're saying it can return anything you want. This is very nice. Very, very cool. I like this. So they're saying in this case, this dependency expects, okay, an optional query parameter q that is an str, which is this one. This all this means that, okay, an optional query parameter skip that is an int and by default is 0. Okay, this is it. What I just explained. Then they're saying an optional query parameter limit that is an int and default by 100, an int limit, an integer default by 100. Okay, and they're saying then it just returns a dict containing those values. Okay, all this. Okay, like I explained earlier. And they're saying info FastAPI added support for annotated and started recommending it in version 0.95. Of course, we know this because we studied this in the third or second stream. And I've been using it again and again. And they're saying if you have an older version, you would get errors when trying to use annotated. Make sure you upgrade the FastAPI version to at least 0.95 before using annotated. Okay, we know that. So they're saying import depends. Okay, and here it is. It has been imported. Okay, so we're done with that importation. Okay, we have our dependency here and we've imported depends. Okay, let's go on to the explanation. Don't mind about this. They're going to explain this soon. I now know how their documentation actually works. Then they're saying declare the dependency in the dependent. Okay, so they're saying the same way you would use body, query, etc, and etc would mean maybe probably cookie, header, okay, path, same concept. So the same way you use body query, etc, with your path operation function parameters, use depends with a new parameter. Okay, so you see we have what is called a parameter called commons. Okay, and then it has been annotated. Its type is a dictionary and it depends. Okay, so depends is becoming metadata. Okay, just like body, query, path, cookie, header can be metadata. Okay, and that we use to add metadata, we need annotated. So they're saying you put depends. Okay, then you put a dependency. Okay, so the dependent. Okay, so the dependent is this. It's a dependent, and this is the dependency. Wow. Excuse me, I'm going to bite my tongue today. Speaking a lot of English. Okay, so for guys with other versions and variants, check this. Okay, but again, the change is simply in annotations using union, but same concept. All right, so they're saying although you use depends in your parameter of your function the same way you use body query, depends work the same. Let me read this again. Okay, sorry. Although you use depends in the parameters of your function the same way you use body query among others, depends works a bit differently. Okay, they're saying you can give depends only a single parameter. Okay, of course we know that with body query and others you can give multiple parameters like minimum, GE, LT, okay, LE, stuff like that, or default. They're saying this parameter must be something like a function. You don't call it directly. Don't add the parentheses at the end. You just pass it as a parameter to depends. And that function takes parameters the same way that path operation functions do. Okay. So if I can copy this just to show you what they mean, I do this, I paste, meaning this function don't come here and call it. Don't come here and say depends, then you put parentheses like this. Don't. Simply state the function name as an argument to depends. And depends takes only one parameter. All right. Let's go on. They have a tip for us here. They're saying you will see what other things apart from functions that can be used as dependencies in the next chapter. Good. I can't wait for the next chapter coming up, of course, tomorrow. So they're saying whenever a new request arrives, FastAPI will take care of calling your dependency, or in brackets, dependable function with correct parameters, meaning it will pass, like in this case, when this is called, when it finds these common parameters and they execute this endpoint, okay, everything here, it will call common parameters with queue, with skip, and with limit. It will pass the right data. Okay, get the result from your function. Okay, meaning get what has been returned here. And after that, what are they saying? Oh, come on, where is this? Assign that result to the parameter in your path operation function. Very awesome to know. Okay, so you're saying common parameters, the path items will get the result, and the path users will also get its result. If you're wondering what those are, it's this one here: items and users. Both get what they need. And they're saying this way, you write shared code once, and FastAPI takes care of calling it for your path operations. So like you see, it is shared code. You wrote one function, okay, but it's being used here and here, okay? And in your case, you may be having more than one. So you're saying share annotated dependencies. In the examples above, you see that there's a tiny bit of code duplication. When you need to use the common parameters dependency, you have to write a whole parameter with the type annotation and depends, okay? Like this. So commons annotated, you say that commons is a type of dict, and the metadata is depends, and you pass the name of the function, which is the dependency. But they're saying, but because we are using annotated, we can store that annotated value in a variable and use it multiple times. Yeah, this is nice. Actually, I've been thinking about this, but I thought probably if I start mentioning it, maybe it could confuse many of you. But I've been thinking about this a lot. This makes total sense. I was actually thinking about this. I would do this kind of stuff, and this is the line of code which they've highlighted. Okay, you see, because now if you look at if I scroll up, you see all this part I've highlighted. Okay, and this one is the same thing. Okay, same thing. So they put it in one variable, which is here. It's saying commons, okay? Not this. It's commons dep, commons dependency, annotated dict, depends that. Okay. Then it's a commons dep, commons dep, which is this one here. Plain code. Very cool. Very cool. Okay, let's continue. We're almost there. Then of course, guys who have other versions of Python, look at this, but same concept. What changes is simply using union in Python 3.9, and Python 3.8 and above also I think also using union. Okay, yeah, nothing really changes, but the concept is the same. So let's continue. They say tip. This is just standard Python. It's called a type alias. It's actually not specific to FastAPI. Yeah, that's why I think it was coming in my mind. I was like, wait, but I can write this code, this one, summarize things. So they're saying, but because FastAPI is based on Python, on the Python standards, including annotated, you can use this trick in your code. Yeah, which is a cool thing. And they've given us that cool emoji. So they're saying the dependencies will keep working as expected. The best part is that the type information will be preserved. Great. Which means that your editor will be able to keep providing you with auto-completion, inline errors, etc. The same for other tools like MyPy. Okay. So type information is preserved, which means we get auto-completion and inline errors from our editor, but even still we get validation, we get extraction, validation, and filtering from FastAPI itself. And of course, the Open API schema and the UI docs. So they're saying this will be especially useful when you use it in a large code base where you use the same dependencies over and over again in many path operations. Okay. Yes. In a large code base, you want to minimize redundancy and repetition, and this would help massively. So if I continue, they're saying to async or not to async. Okay. So you're saying as dependencies will also be called by FastAPI, the same as your path operation functions, the same rules apply while defining your functions. You can use async def or normal def. Okay. Meaning your function can start with async def or simply normal def like that. Okay. Depends on what you want to do. Like how they explain when we were studying about asynchronous coding in our first, that was, I think, where was that? Here, concurrency, async, and IO. Okay. So let's continue. And again, for those who are just joining us today, yeah, we've moved the journey. We've said all this, okay? All this. We're now here on dependencies. And before you know it, we'll be finishing and building, and I'll be building that project soon, okay? With a little patience and consistency, okay? So you're saying it doesn't matter. FastAPI will know what to do. Isn't this awesome, guys? Yeah, you should be thankful to these guys who created FastAPI. And it's saying if you don't know, check the async in a hurry section about async and await in the docs. Okay. So it's saying integrated with OpenAPI, it's saying all the request declarations, validations, and requirements of your dependencies and sub-dependencies will be integrated in the same OpenAPI schema. Guys, we know this. Or for everything. This has been the case. So they're saying so the interactive docs will have all the information from these dependencies too. Okay. So you see, we have these parameters here. We can also see it for ourselves. Okay, if I copy this, okay, and I replace this code and paste. Okay, so and I come back here to the documentation and refresh. Okay, if I open this, you see we have parameters, we have queue. Okay, they tell us what it is: a query parameter, string or null, skip, an integer query parameter with a default value of 0, limit, an integer, a query parameter with a default value of 100. Okay, can close this. If I go back to this one, it's the same thing. That queue, a string or null, a query parameter, skip, an integer, a query parameter, limit, an integer, a query parameter. Same stuff. Okay. I will, where am I? Need to scroll. So yeah, basically the same thing. Okay, so you're saying simple usage. If you look at it, path operation functions are declared to be used whenever a path and operation matches. Then FastAPI takes care of calling the function with the correct parameters, extracting the data from the request. We know that, okay? If you've been following with me, we know that already. Actually, all or most of the web frameworks work in the same way. This is true. I've seen this for Django, for Spring Boot, Laravel, same thing. Express, Node.js, same thing. Nest.js, same thing. So they're saying you call those functions directly, they are called by a framework, and in this case, FastAPI. I mean, you never call, okay? You never call them directly. Your framework calls them for you. So you're saying with this dependency injection system, you can also tell FastAPI that your path operation function also depends on something else that should be executed before your path operation function. FastAPI will take care of executing it and injecting the results. So the dependency is executed, okay? And that information is provided to your path operation function. So this process of providing it is called injecting the results. So if we look up, like for example, in our example here, FastAPI will first of all execute this for you, get the results, and then give them to these individual functions. So the dependency is executed first before the actual path operation function. So yes, so you're saying other common items, other common terms for this same idea of dependency injection are resources, providers, services, injectables, components. Yeah, good to know. Because you may find someone talking about a resource, a provider, a service, injectable, but the same idea. So we have here what they call FastAPI plugins. They're saying integrations and plugins can be built using the dependency injection system. Yeah, it makes sense. But in fact, there is actually no need to create plugins. As by using dependencies, it is possible to declare an infinite number of integrations and interactions that can become available to your path operation functions. Yeah, this is true and makes sense. And dependencies can be created in a very simple and intuitive way that allows you to just import the Python packages you need and integrate them with your API functions in a couple of lines of code, literally. You will see examples of this in the next chapters about relational and NoSQL databases, security, among others. Yeah, and we are soon there, okay? We have security here. We have SQL databases here coming up. Exciting times ahead. I've really enjoyed these streams. This is stream 21. I don't know how many I'm going to have more. Maybe 20 more to make 40. But if I need 100 streams to learn FastAPI, I will have 100 streams. I don't matter. I don't care mean whatever it will take. Okay. FastAPI compatibility. They're saying the simplicity of the dependency injection system makes FastAPI compatible with all the relational databases, NoSQL databases, external packages, external APIs, authentication and authorization systems, API usage and monitoring systems, response data injections, etc. Wow, yeah, it covers a lot. And this just makes sense because you just plug in and that dependency will be called before the path operation function. Interesting. Simple and powerful. They're saying, although the hierarchical dependency injection system is very simple to define and use, it's still very powerful. You can define dependencies that in turn can define dependencies themselves, meaning a dependency calling a dependency, or a service calling a service, or a provider calling another provider, or a component calling another component. Okay? Or an external API calling another external API. Makes sense. They're saying in the end, a hierarchical tree of dependencies is built, and the dependency injection system takes care of solving all these dependencies for you and their sub-dependencies and providing or injecting the results at each step. Cool. For example, let's say you have 4 API endpoints or path operations, okay? Items public, items private, users, user ID activate, items pro. Then you could add different permission requirements for each of them with just dependencies and sub dependencies. Okay, so you have a current user, which is provided to active user, and items public, and items from items user we have paying user, items private, admin user. From admin user we have items pro, and admin user we have what this. Okay, so different levels and very achievable. Okay, so they're saying integrated with the Open API. They're saying all these dependencies, while declaring their requirements, also add parameters, validations, etc. to your path operations. FastAPI will take care of adding it all to the Open API schema so that it is shown to the interactive documentation systems. Very nice. So if I'm to summarize this, okay, let me summarize this for you. Okay, it is simply create a function. Number one, that does something. Okay, it can take some data and return something. Okay, as simple as that. That takes some information. Usually your arguments are query parameters, like in this case. Okay, then give that function name as an argument to depends, like this, to depends. Okay, then you can either annotate or not. Okay, and use it as your type, like in this case, for your function parameters. And Python will take care of everything for you. Okay. For example, maybe you can maybe have another one like this. If I copy this and paste it here, and I say parameters 1, okay, I can call this one inside here. Okay, dependency by dependency. Okay, maybe I come here and do something like maybe val equals to await this. Okay, common parameters 1, something like that. The same thing, or I can even unpack. Okay, I unpack q, skip, okay, limit, like this. So far, the API will know when it reads the, for example, like this one here, it will first call this one, common parameters 1, okay, then you call, of course, it will, when it comes here, okay, it will find this dependency, but this will be called, okay, which will cause it to call this first, okay, but when it enters, it will find out this one. So this one will work first, okay, by calling this one, then call this one, then it is finally returned here. Very simple to understand in my case. Yeah, so this has been a nice stream. So tomorrow we shall look at this, the next step, classes as dependencies, something else for tomorrow. I'll end the stream now. Thank you all for joining. We shall look at classes, sub-dependencies, finish all the things concerning dependencies. Then we have another interesting topic which I have been waiting for. I can't wait to talk about security. This one, I can't wait to talk about security in detail. Okay. I see. Wait, I saw something interesting. They're talking about. Can I see this? See, first steps, get user auth with password, bearer token, bearer with G. I can't wait to see this. Middleware, but also databases. Yeah, baby steps. I'll get there. Okay. So thank you all for joining. Have a good evening, good morning, good afternoon.